The European Union stands as one of the most significant and complex political and economic entities in the world, comprising 27 member states and encompassing over 440 million people. It is a unique experiment in supranational governance, aimed at fostering peace, economic prosperity, and shared values across a diverse continent. Since its inception, the EU has delivered impressive achievements, from creating a vast single market to establishing a common currency and coordinating foreign policy efforts. However, despite these successes, the European Union is currently grappling with a broad array of challenges that threaten to undermine its cohesion, stability, and future growth prospects. Understanding these issues in depth and exploring how the EU might resolve them is crucial for anyone interested in the future of Europe and global cooperation. One of the most pressing challenges the EU faces today is the erosion of political unity and the rise of Euroscepticism. While the EU was originally designed to foster deeper integration among member states, recent years have witnessed growing resistance from some countries and political groups that question the benefits of EU membership. This resistance manifests in calls for national sovereignty, opposition to EU regulatory frameworks, and skepticism towards EU institutions. The rise of populist and nationalist parties in countries such as Hungary, Poland, Italy, and France reflects broader societal anxieties about globalization, immigration, economic inequality, and cultural change. This political fragmentation presents a significant challenge for the EU, as decision-making often requires consensus or qualified majorities. When member states pursue divergent agendas or openly challenge EU norms, particularly regarding rule of law, judicial independence, and media freedom, it becomes difficult to act decisively on shared problems. For instance, Hungary and Poland have clashed with EU institutions over judicial reforms that critics say undermine democratic checks and balances. These disputes have led to threats of sanctions and withholding of EU funds, yet enforcement mechanisms remain cumbersome and politically sensitive. Resolving this crisis of political unity demands a multi-pronged approach. First, the EU must reinforce its commitment to democratic values and rule of law through stronger, clearer mechanisms that balance respect for national sovereignty with the protection of shared principles. This could include enhancing conditionality on EU funding, tied to compliance with democratic standards and judicial independence. Second, the EU needs to improve its communication and engagement with citizens, many of whom feel alienated or disconnected from Brussels bureaucracy. Participatory democracy tools, such as citizens' assemblies, improved transparency, and multilingual outreach, can help rebuild trust. Lastly, institutional reforms aimed at making EU governance more efficient and accountable could reduce perceptions of overreach and improve responsiveness. Closely linked to political fragmentation is the persistent economic disparity among EU member states and regions. The European single market has created enormous economic opportunities, but growth and prosperity have not been evenly shared. Western and Northern European countries like Germany, the Netherlands, and Sweden enjoy high GDP per capita, advanced infrastructure, and competitive industries. Meanwhile, many Southern and Eastern European countries continue to struggle with lower incomes, higher unemployment, underdeveloped infrastructure, and brain drain. These disparities contribute to social tensions, fuel Eurosceptic sentiments, and complicate policymaking. The COVID-19 pandemic accentuated these divides, as countries with stronger fiscal positions could implement robust support measures, while others faced tighter constraints. The EU's cohesion policy, including the European Regional Development Fund and the Cohesion Fund, aims to reduce these inequalities by financing infrastructure, innovation, and social projects in less developed areas. The ambitious Next Generation EU Recovery Plan, worth $750 billion, seeks to stimulate economic convergence through investments in green energy, digitalization, and skills development. However, achieving true economic convergence requires more than funding. Governance challenges at national and regional levels often hamper effective implementation of projects. Corruption, inefficient public administration, and lack of coordination between levels of government can delay or dilute impact. Furthermore, some regions face structural challenges, such as aging populations, limited access to capital, and low innovation capacity. that require comprehensive and long-term strategies. Strengthening institutions, enhancing public-private partnerships, fostering education and research, and promoting entrepreneurship are key components of a sustainable solution. Migration and integration remain hot-button issues that continue to test EU solidarity. The 2015 refugee crisis exposed significant weaknesses in the EU's common asylum and migration policies. Member states struggled to agree on burden-sharing arrangements, border management, and relocation schemes, leading to a fragmented and often contentious response. While the number of asylum seekers has fluctuated since then, migration pressures persist due to ongoing conflicts, economic disparities, and climate change effects in neighboring regions. The social integration of migrants and refugees also poses challenges. Language barriers, cultural differences, and difficulties accessing education, healthcare, and labor markets can hinder successful integration. In some countries, these challenges have been exploited by populist politicians to stoke fears of social fragmentation and insecurity. Addressing these concerns requires the EU to adopt a holistic migration strategy that balances humanitarian responsibility with effective border control and fair burden sharing. Proposals to reform the Dublin regulation, which currently places the burden of asylum processing disproportionately on border countries like Greece and Italy, seek to distribute responsibility more equitably. Moreover, the EU aims to enhance legal migration pathways, reduce irregular migration through cooperation with countries of origin and transit, and invest heavily in integration programs that focus on language training, skills development, and social inclusion. Encouraging intercultural dialogue and combating discrimination at all levels are essential to fostering cohesive and resilient societies. Climate change is arguably the most urgent challenge facing the EU and humanity at large. The European Green Deal, unveiled in 2019, sets out an ambitious roadmap to make Europe climate neutral by 2050, with interim targets such as reducing greenhouse gas emissions by at least 55% by 2030 compared to 1990 levels. Achieving this will require transforming energy systems, transportation, agriculture, and industry while promoting circular economy principles to reduce waste and resource consumption. While the Green Deal establishes a visionary framework, it faces significant hurdles. Many regions and sectors remain heavily dependent on fossil fuels, such as coal mining areas and energy-intensive industries like steel and cement. The transition risks exacerbating regional inequalities if not managed carefully, as workers and communities in carbon-intensive sectors face job losses and economic disruption. The EU's Just Transition Mechanism allocates around $17.5 billion from the Recovery Fund and additional funding to help these regions diversify their economies, retrain workers, and invest in clean technologies. Implementing climate policies requires coordinated action across member states with diverse energy mixes and economic structures. Some countries are more advanced in renewable energy adoption, while others rely on nuclear or coal. Harmonizing regulations, incentivizing green innovation, and promoting energy efficiency will be vital. The EU must also address external dimensions, such as ensuring its climate policies align with global efforts and managing the impact of carbon border adjustment mechanisms on trade relations. Beyond mitigation, adaptation to climate impacts, such as increased heat waves, floods, and droughts, is critical. Protecting biodiversity, upgrading infrastructure, and supporting climate-resilient agriculture will help reduce vulnerabilities. Public awareness and participation are also essential to garner support for lifestyle changes and sustainable consumption. Demographic shifts represent another formidable challenge. Europe's population is aging rapidly due to low fertility rates and longer life expectancies. The old age dependency ratio, the number of retirees relative to working-age people, is rising, putting pressure on pension systems, healthcare, and social services. Many countries are also experiencing population decline, especially in rural and peripheral areas, which affects local economies and service provision. Addressing demographic challenges involves a combination of policies. Encouraging higher birth rates through family-friendly measures such as affordable childcare, parental leave, and flexible work arrangements is one part of the solution. Equally important is increasing labor market participation, particularly for women, older workers, and migrants. Lifelong learning and skills training will help workers adapt to technological changes and extend working lives. Immigration, when effectively managed and integrated, can offset population decline and support economic growth. The EU also faces significant geopolitical and security challenges. The resurgence of great power competition, notably with Russia and China, has introduced new complexities for European security. Russia's annexation of Crimea in 2014, ongoing conflict in eastern Ukraine, and interference in European politics and cyber operations highlight the threats to regional stability. Meanwhile, China's growing economic influence and assertiveness require the EU to carefully balance cooperation with competition. The EU's common security and defense policy has advanced cooperation on military missions, crisis management, and cybersecurity. However, defense remains largely the domain of individual member states, and the EU lacks a unified military force or a fully coordinated strategy. Enhancing defense capabilities, fostering interoperability, and deepening cooperation with NATO and the United States are crucial to maintaining peace and security. Moreover, the EU must develop a comprehensive approach that combines military preparedness with diplomacy, development aid, and resilience building. Digital transformation is another area of immense opportunity and challenge. The EU has made important strides in regulating data privacy through the General Data Protection Regulation, GDPR, setting a global standard. It is also developing regulatory frameworks for artificial intelligence, digital services, and online platforms to ensure innovation aligns with fundamental rights and fair competition. However, the EU faces a digital divide within and among member states. Access to high-speed internet, digital skills, and advanced technologies is uneven, threatening to widen economic and social disparities. The EU's Digital Decade initiative aims to build digital capacities across sectors and regions by 2030, including targets for connectivity, skills, digital public services, and business digitalization. Public investment, research and development, and fostering startups and innovation ecosystems will be essential to maintain global competitiveness. Brexit, the departure of the United Kingdom from the EU, remains a significant factor shaping the EU's political and economic landscape. Brexit not only disrupted trade, investment, and regulatory frameworks, but also raised questions about the future unity of the European project. The EU must navigate a new relationship with the UK based on cooperation, but also clear boundaries, managing challenges such as the Northern Ireland Protocol and ongoing negotiations. Corruption and governance issues persist in some member states, threatening trust in both national and EU institutions. Ensuring the rule of law, transparency in public procurement, and accountability is vital to preserving legitimacy. The EU has introduced tools like the Rule of Law Framework and links funding to rule of law compliance, but enforcement remains complex. Institutional reform is frequently discussed as a way to enhance the EU's effectiveness. Proposals range from streamlining decision-making processes, increasing the power of the European Parliament, to revising voting rules and enhancing subsidiarity, ensuring decisions are made at the most appropriate level. Greater transparency and citizen participation could also strengthen democratic legitimacy. In summary, the European Union faces a diverse and interconnected set of challenges. Political fragmentation, economic disparities, migration pressures, climate change, demographic shifts, security threats, digital transformation, the aftermath of Brexit, and governance concerns. Yet, it also has remarkable tools, policies, and institutions designed to address these issues. The path forward lies in combining bold leadership, collective commitment, inclusive policies, and continuous adaptation. By investing in innovation, sustainability, social cohesion, and democratic engagement, the EU can continue to be a global leader and a model of cooperation in a rapidly changing world. The challenges are immense, but so too are the opportunities for building a resilient, prosperous, and united Europe.